Parents of Reddit, what has your child done to make you think they lived a past life? She asked if I remembered when she died, or when her family died. My daughter then told me about her 3 brothers that died, and their names, but I forgot them. Then get parents died, then she died, but she was a boy. Then she came to this family and she likes it better, because we have medicine that works. Sad she then grieved for them for about an hour, with me trying to help her through it. She was 6 years old, with autism, and a speech delay. It was quite a shock for her to relay the whole story to me. The next day she told my sister the same thing, almost word for word. She then grieved for them for about an hour, with me trying to help her through it. That's really heartbreaking. I don't know what to think about the idea of reincarnation or how to prove it happens, or what it even means. But when I hear about experiences like this, I can see why the belief is so strong. People are really emotionally connected and have powerful experiences. My 3-year-old said, I was your mom in heaven. Multiple times. When I was 6 weeks pregnant with her, my mom died unexpectedly the day she found out the secret that I was pregnant at 40 with what would be her last and 21st grandchild. We were going to surprise her on her 75th birthday, 2 weeks later, but a niece let the secret out. When my girl was 4, we were looking through pictures boxes. I have no family pictures posted in my house. Later that night I realized my girl took 3 pictures of my mom and put them in her room. She's never seen pictures of my mom before. I asked her why she took those pictures and she said, because I'm pretty. Because I'm pretty, or your mom kept her self-esteem when she died. When I was 3 I told my dad I used to live in Ohio before living with him. All these interesting stories and I'm just that guy from Ohio. Haha, that's great. I mean, realistically, if reincarnation was real, the vast majority of us would have just had some lame but previous life. All these people like my Timmy was a World War II pilot in his past life. Nobody's going around claiming that their kid is the reincarnation of an accountant from Kansas City. My grandmother passed away about 10 years ago. We were very close and my whole life she always told me that she would be my guardian angel after she died. When my daughter, now 5, was about 3, she had terrible night terrors and would have a hard time going to sleep. I would spend the evenings with her, comforting her to help her get to sleep, reading books, talking to her, etc. One night we were talking about what do you want to be when you grow up. She kept telling me that she used to be a grown-up. After prying and asking what she meant, she told me that when she was a grown-up she used to be my grandma. She then told me a story about when I was young. I had an accident and was burned when helping her cook dinner. It's something that I never told her but did actually happen. It completely creeped me out at first, and she has never really mentioned anything else like that since. My grandmother reluctantly told me how my uncle, who was around 2 or 3 at the time, described to her in great detail skinning the white men. We are white. OMG, I need to hear that. I have a few, all the same kid. First, when my son was 3, he told me that he was once kidnapped and the police accidentally shot and killed him when they were trying to rescue him. When he turned 5 he told me he had never made it this far. Also when he was 5, we drove past my grandparents' old house. They have been gone 16 and 18 years now. He told me I used to play in that house with Pappy, my dad, when I was little, except the house used to be white. The house did indeed used to be white and it had been painted an ugly grey. My dad also had 9 siblings, 3 of which died in infancy. None of the siblings were shot by police. A set of twin boys born prematurely in the 1940s didn't survive a week. My aunt died of internal bleeding the mid-1950s. She was 2. Unfreaking believable. I've only ever shared with a few people how my late mother regularly hid a packet of biscuits, usually chocolate digestives, from my brothers and I, so when we had visitors, there was always some biscuits to go with a cup of tea. How it's done in Britain. I once caught my daughter stuffing a packet of biscuits in the back of a cupboard behind a big bag of pasta. At the time, I thought Crafty Cow wants them for herself but left them there to see if they'd disappear. Maybe for a teaching moment about not being selfish or something. They didn't disappear, but reappeared when some friends came over. She just waltzed out of the kitchen, just as my mother used to, opening a packet of biscuits. She never knew my mother and I'm pretty certain nobody else would have encouraged this pretty specific behavior. I don't believe she's the reincarnation of my mother, but I'm just intrigued at her selflessness. She doesn't get it from me. Those biscuits wouldn't have gotten past a couple cups of coffee with me around. She still does it too. We have a biscuit box in the cupboard, usually with a few packs of biscuits, but when I keep a check on how many packs I've bought, there will be one short or I'll come across a random packet in a cupboard somewhere, and she likes to be the biscuit bringer when we have visitors. My daughter, right before she turned 5, was in our hall in the middle of the night, still asleep, whimpering and crying. I got her to come lay down with me, and when I asked her what the dream was, she got very upset and said it wasn't a dream I remembered. She told me she remembered when she was a bad dog, and they made her go to sleep. I asked her about it again later and she got very upset, said she was a bad dog and started crying, saying she didn't want to remember it again. She has no idea what it means to put a dog down, let alone that it is what happens to bad dogs. I think this is the first time someone remembers being something else but a human being. My son was 3 at the time. We were at a ceramics place and I was taking a wheel throwing lesson when he say to this lady, "I saw you in the fire. Did it hurt when you got burned? I was there but I couldn't help you." She turned white as a sheet and explained to me that when she was a young girl, her house caught fire and she was badly burned. She told me that used to tell her family that she followed a little boy she'd never seen out of her room and then out of the burning house. She is sure that my son is her guardian angel, and that he was sent to tell her this as an older lady to make sure always remembers. We became pretty good friends until we moved away. My son is now 16 and doesn't remember much about this other than he has faint memories of her. When I was younger, I would have sleepwalk, appearing to be fully conscious, then lying down and going back to sleep like nothing happened. There have been times my mom caught me opening windows in the middle of the night. Another time she was in the kitchen reading the paper and I walked in, made myself a glass of orange juice, drank it, then went to sleep at the table in front of her. One time, my mom and dad were watching a World War II documentary late one night. Something about the push into Europe and a massive tank battle, probably Iraq. I walked downstairs and my parents told me to go back to bed. I said, "I want to watch the battle again." Parents said, "I've never seen this documentary." I said, "No, but I remember it. We were in that one. It went boom." Points to a specific tank in the middle ground. I remember the one behind us going boom too. Mum puts me to bed, saying I was talking nonsense. Comes back and jokes to my dad. Dad says he's not so sure, because while she was putting me to bed both tanks exploded. The one in the rear first, followed by the one I pointed out. This was a documentary. The footage I was referring to was combat camera crew recording the battle. When my sister was 3, she would go on and on about her brother, Brian. We're all girls, and we don't know where she would have heard the name, but it was all, "Brian does this, Brian and me used to do that," on and on. Thinking Brian was an imaginary friend, I asked her where Brian was now. She said he's dead. I am, too. The bomb got us and our house is gone. Very weird. Not as creepy, but my little brother around ages 2-3 would always say, once when I was a teenager, and tell a story. I teased him, but he seemed to recall so much. He would become upset when I told him it never happened. You were never a teenager. By ages 4-5 he had no recollection of his teenage self. My brother was very ill as a child, so he didn't get to socialize much outside the house. Every doctor visit we rushed affairs in and out of the room. I also came from a family with pretty minimal TV watching. At 3 my brother explained to the family a belief system we later understood to be Buddhism. He then asked all the crosses be removed from his room, as the man on the cross was recycled into a new baby and it was mean to keep looking at his old body. Apparently I used to always creep my mom out when I was really young by singing a full song, over and over again whenever I was in the tub. She said she has no idea what language it was, but it was always the exact same. She swears it wasn't a child gibberish and was obviously a full language, just not our native English. I try to remember it but I just can't quite get there. I do remember singing it though, and then one day not being able to sing it anymore when I was probably 6 or 7, and being distressed by the loss of it. I wish I knew what the heck it was. Might sound crazy and I've never done it, but maybe hypnosis can help you remember. Could be a crazy story for you. My 3-year-old niece. In a hotel near her home. I've been here I used to sit in this chair and knit, wouldn't say anything else when pressed further. Another time in an antique shop, we looked at an old school desk with a flip-top lid when she, bemused, said where's the ink? Well, it just seemed strange that she'd expect there to be one. My 3yo son said that he used to be a mommy and had lots and lots of babies. Signs point to possible reincarnation from a stray cat. When I was about 3, I used to tell my mum stories of being a little Chinese girl. Apparently I lived at the bottom of a hill with my grandmother, and I died in a flood. When I was 6 or 7, I came home from school upset that I'd been surrounded by a group of boys, and I cried to my mum that it was like when the soldiers on horses came to take us away. My son went for over a year talking about his other mommy and daddy, with a completely straight and serious face. We have a blended family, so he has me, mom, and at his father's house his dad, stepmom, and brother. He said he had 2 fake mommies and a fake daddy and then a set of real ones. When trying to get clarification thinking he was having trouble adapting to new family roles, he informed us that we were the fakes and that his real parents were much older, lived far away on a farm, with his older brother. That story came up off and on, as well as weird side statements from him. We had him at the one time, in a private room. He hears voices outside which he normally wouldn't pay any mind to. He perked up, looked at the door, and goes, "That sounded like my real mommy's voice." He was very excited and animated about it. My kid is usually pretty deadpan, so that was off too. I decided to just ride it out, but admittedly it did freak me out at first. He hasn't done it in a while. My family took everyone on a trip to see their old neighborhood. They drove by a house where, about 15 years earlier, a little girl was hit by a car and died. My cousin, who was about 4 at the time, never had been in the neighborhood and never heard this tragic story, stopped what she was doing and said, "Oh, that's where I died, isn't it?" She then resumed playing with her dolls, or whatever it was she was doing. Jesus Christ. So I am raised Roman Catholic. My son is raised Roman Catholic, but I was dating this Muslim guy who would play prayers constantly that were on YouTube. This particular day my boyfriend was playing a prayer that's supposed to protect you from jinn. My 3-year-old son looked up from his coloring book, said clear as day, "Now they will be gone for 1000 days." My boyfriend looked him dead in the eye and was like, "How do you know that?" My son smiled, shrugged and continued to color. I don't know if this is true, but my boyfriend explained that if you recited that specific prayer it was supposed to banish evil spirits for 1000 days. To this day I still get chills when I think about it. My mother was also super freaked cause I told her daddy used to be my baby, but I drowned when he was my size. I was 4. My grandfather drowned when my dad was 4. Confirmed you're an avatar. When she was aged around 4 years old, my friend told her mother, "I'm not coming back here again, mommy. This is my last time." Her mother asked her what she meant. She said, "I will never be alive like this again. I'm not coming back here." She is in her late 40s now and is the head of a large Buddhist group. My daughter was 3-4. She kept asking me, "Mommy, do you remember when you were little and I was big? I took good care of you. We went to the store all the time." Then when her little brother was born she asked me if she could call him Augie, pronounced Oggy. I asked her where she heard that name and she told me that she made it up. My great-grandfather passed away the 31st of August of 2001. She was born the 7th of September of 2011. My great-grandfather used to take me to King Soopers a few times a week and he had a dog, long before I was born, named Augie, nickname for August. Had a hard time wrapping my brain around it. If you do any research into past lives they often talk about the theory that we travel in groups between lives. That typically if you have a role in someone's life now, you've had a role in their past life as well. Sisters become mothers and daughters, etc. This definitely supports that idea. This is about my sister. We have always called her a baby genius and she has always seemed like an old soul. I remember when she was 4 she was playing in another room and my mom was cleaning. My sister comes into the room and asks my mom, "Have you been cleaning because it really smells like ether in here?" As in the surgical anesthesia used in the Civil War. I had never even heard of that word before. When we asked her how she knew the smell of ether said, "It is what we used." That is a terrifyingly coherent 4-year-old. When my oldest son was 3, he used to wake up crying and saying that he wanted to go home. Over and over he would repeat it. I would reassure him that everything was okay, he was at home. Happens for many months. We had a huge map of the world in the hallway, and one night when he was upset, I took him to the map and showed him where we lived and asked where his other home was. He pointed out a small town in Mexico. Day after day he pointed to the same exact place. So, we took him there. It was a beautiful little area and we had a great time. There was nothing profound in any of his reactions. When we got home he started sleeping through the night and never mentioned it again. We live in California and my husband and I are both white. However, our son is adopted, and although his bio father is technically unknown, we were told it is probable that he was Hispanic. Such wonderful parents to take your son to that little spot on the map. Such wisdom, and how amazing that it forever afterwards calmed your little boy down. When my daughter was little, younger than 4, not only did she never get mad once, she loved to put on bathrobes and sit Indian style and close her eyes and meditate, with no knowledge of the practice that we were aware of. My mom loves to tell this story. When I was young, I really wanted to learn Russian, so they got me into a class. In general, Russian was very easy to pick up and use. It sort of made sense and I could construct complex sentences. The teacher told my mother that it was spooky, because I could speak it in a way that they hadn't been teaching me. I could figure out colloquial phrases. To this day, I still have it and haven't lost my Russian. Sleeper agent most likely. I asked my son once who he was before he was my son. He was small, maybe 3. He looked at me sadly and said, "It was dark and cold and I wasn't anything, just all by myself." And then he perked up and said, "And before that I had black wings and I flew. And I'd take shiny stuff because all shiny things are mine." And that is how I realized my son was Magpie in his past life, and gave me a clue where to find my missing earrings. He had a hidden cache of jewelry in his room. The little imp. Or a dragon. More things than I will ever be able to explain. His old birthdays. His dear departed wife's old birthdays. This 2-year-old baby was inconsolable that he didn't get her, his wife, something for her birthday which he remembered. This is a very small sample. I spent 6 years splitting time between now and years ago. He remembered old family members and 1,000 things that no one would believe. Also a few years ago, he was maybe 6. He said, "You know mom, I think it's pretty cool. You are born and get to live and then you get to do it all again." I would love to hear absolutely as much detail as you are willing to type out. My friend had a miscarriage before she had her first daughter. A few years ago when her daughter was about 4, a group of us were at a party and her daughter was sitting on her lap and said something along the lines of, "I'm sorry I left you before mommy. I was hurting really bad and I wasn't ready." My friend asked her what she meant and her daughter said she left her before she was born but came back. Super creepy. Daughter doesn't remember this conversation and still doesn't know about the miscarriage. That is heartbreaking and beautiful. When my youngest daughter was 3 years old, she would very often get upset and insist I help her find her kids because they needed her. She said she was in a car accident and died, but her 2 children in the backseat survived and needed her. By the time she was 5, she no longer remembered, but for almost 2 years she had an intense drive to find her kids and let them know that their mommy was okay. Imagine how insane it would if she had found them. This happened right after a war. Mother was walking my older sister, who was 3 years old at the time. My older sister pointed into the forest and said, "That's where you buried me." Mum was like, "What?" My sister continued, "Yeah, I was sick, remember?" Without showing emotions, Mother freaked out and took her straight home. It turned out, Mother had an older child who passed away during the war, due to an illness and lack of medical aid. The spot that my older sister pointed out was the exact location where my mother's eldest daughter was buried. My mom loves to tell the story when little me was with her driving past the cemetery, and I announced loudly, "That's where they put you when you commit treason against the king." He literally told me he was 3 and pretending to run over his Lego men. When asked to stop, he said, "That's how I died, isn't it?" "No, you've never died." "Yes, I have. When I was 2 last time, the car hit me. My other mummy cried, then I came to you." He's a teen now, doesn't remember a thing about it. Heebie-jeebies from that one. My son, now 3, has been terrified of sharks since he could talk. He loves water, loves taking baths and the pool, but freaked out on his first beach trip after my wife took him into the water. He started screaming about the sharks, and she brought him back to our little spot. This was last summer, and the odd thing is we had no idea how he could have known that sharks are predators and are something to be scared of. When we asked him why he was so afraid of them, he said, "They bit my leg off. I could feel their tongue with my foot." Also, a few weeks ago my wife was going through pictures and showed him one of her at her elementary school. She said, "See, that's where I went to school when I was young." Without hesitation he said, "I know, I was watching you." To which my wife replied, "You were watching me? Where were you watching me from?" My son points to our skylight. "All the way up there." According to my parents, I did something like this when I was about 2 years old. We were in the waiting area of a restaurant, and I indicated to them that I wanted to be put on the bench of the piano that was against one wall. Apparently I pressed a few keys to test what was what, then went into perfect playing posture, only pausing when I realized that my foot didn't reach the pedals. After dinner they asked me whether I had ever played a piano before, and I replied, "Oh, yeah, I played it when I was a man." Not a parent, but my mum told me this story. When she was in law school, her mother, my grandmother, bought her a string of pearls. My mother continued to wear this same string of pearls long after graduation and long after my grandmother died. My grandmother died 2 days after I was born, in the same hospital. She got the chance to hold me once, during which time my father swears she transferred her soul into me. One night when I was about 3 or 4, I crawled into my mother's lap. She was wearing her pearls and I reached up to touch them. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "I got these for you before I was born." Then I went back to playing. My mum says she still gets goosebumps when she thinks about that story. I also inherited my grandmother's love of the Packers despite never having lived in Green Bay. I didn't really pay attention the first time I read and didn't realize you said 4, so I initially imagined you as an infant speaking to your mother with a grown-up's voice. My son used to be terrified to go to sleep. He would ask me repeatedly if he would wake up. For just over a year, from when he was almost 3 to a bit over age 4, he would talk about how last time, when he was a baby, he went to sleep but didn't wake up. And he'd talk about how sad it was, and how he would miss me if he didn't wake up. He would repeat this every other night, but sometimes would give no details and other times he would give me more details. He was so little the details were hard to get. He would say he loved me and would never forget me. He'd be surprised in the morning and very excited that he woke up this time. He'd comment about techniques to make sure he woke up, which were very strange kid things like, "Remember my toy truck?" It was really sad. He's 7 now and remembers nothing. Man, I just commented that another post was heartbreaking, but this one is, too. Poor worried little guy. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.